Hello, everybody. This is Live and Uncut with Cooper Schembeckler and Carter Lutz, a Sportscaster original. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls from all around the world in the great state of Michigan. He's a former McDonald's All-American, a Maize and Blue alum. In 1984, he was the 12th overall pick, but in 2024, he's the number 1 overall pick in our hearts. He's a Moose Preserve enthusiast, a man of many talents. He is Tim McCormick. Tim,
come on.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, so good to be with you guys. I'm looking forward to this. We're going to dive deep into basketball at all levels and just have fun.
We're excited. We're very excited.
You know, you mentioned diving into basketball at all levels. That's really the reason why we wanted to talk to you today. For people that don't know, you've been playing basketball since the 70s, really. And, you know, you had a strong high school career, strong college career, NBA, and now post-NBA, you're still doing a lot of stuff. So you're very connected to the game, and we want to maybe try to bridge the gap between what it used to be like, you know, playing ball back in the day then and how the game has changed a lot. So we think we're going to get a lot of really interesting stuff.
Yeah, I fell in love with basketball at a really young age, and the beauty of it was at that point, there weren't a lot of distractions. Like I look at the kids in my neighborhood, they're on jet skis and they're playing 2K and that's their life. And when I was growing up, I carried my basketball cards in my pocket and I studied them and I dreamed. I remember going in the backyard and setting up all of my cards along the porch of the Boston Celtics. And I set up my Pistons cards over here and I had games and I would take shots like the guys that were my heroes. And I just thought, gosh, I wonder if I could someday be like that. I didn't even think I could play in the NBA. That seemed unreachable. But I imagined myself playing against the best players. And so it's been a lifelong love of this game.
So that's one of your many stories we hope to hear today. We know you got a lot of stories. You played with some of the greatest coaches of all time, some of the greatest players of all time for that matter. But let's start from the beginning. Let's start from high school because you came up. You're from, you know, the Detroit area, and you were a top recruit in the Detroit area. You were an All-American in high school, and, you know, today that still has a lot of meaning and people playing the McDonald's All-American game, and it's a big deal, but what did it really mean like back then, especially for you saying you didn't even know if you had an NBA career ahead of you, and out of high school, you were an All-American?
Yeah, it was kind of surreal because you know, growing up, I was shy. I was on my own. I loved playing basketball. That was my outlet. And my sophomore year, I didn't even start the season on varsity, which is crazy to think I was 6'10" or 6'9". And the coach said, you know, it's something you need to earn. And so I played one game on the JV and, you know, scored 30-some points. And the next game I was up. But in my second high school game, I scored 40. And from that minute on, I started receiving college letters. The cute girl in school all of a sudden knew my name. And so those were some of the benefits. Forget the basketball part of it. But everything just took off. And I had paid my dues. I was tall, I was skilled, I loved the game, I loved to compete, and it translated into a lot of high school success.
Well, I absolutely love that. And I think that can kind of piggyback into what I want to ask you, where, you know, you score 40 points, and maybe back then you see that in the paper. Some people might not even heard of it at all. And now you have platforms like Slam and Overtime and Ball is Life, where they're sending guys to games all around the country to film players like Zion when he was back in high school, Cooper Flagg nowadays. So how do you see this affecting the game where these players are getting so much more recognition? And how do you think it's affecting the players, maybe setting unrealistic expectations, driving people to go to these games where they're filling stands not only at high school games, but AAU tournaments, Peach Jam, UAA? How do you see it affecting the game?
You know, Cooper, it's something that's really hard to figure out where it's going. And I'll do a compare and contrast. Playing high school basketball in the late 70s, I didn't know anybody outside of my community. On Saturday morning, I would get the Detroit Free Press and the Detroit News, and you could read all about the players from River Rouge and Lansing Everett. And you just kind of knew it from the newspaper, but you didn't know what they were like, who could play, who couldn't play. And then when I went to the McDonald's All-American game in 1980, I had never met, I had never seen any of the players. I had heard their names by reading Street and Smith magazine, but that's the only way I knew. So when I showed up, I was completely overwhelmed at how good the players were. There was a guy named Russell Cross, and he went to Purdue, and he became an all Big Ten player, top 5 pick in the NBA draft. He didn't work out, but he was so, I couldn't believe how good he was. I had never played against anybody over 6'8" before. And, 2 summers ago, I had a conversation with Cameron Boozer. This summer before that, I talked to Cooper Flagg, and I asked them about, how many times have you played against, certain players? And Cooper shared that there was a kid in California, I can't remember his name now, but that's 3,000, 4,000 miles away. He said he's played against him 25 times. That's just something that is part of today's culture. And then also, I think that a lot of kids don't play for the love of the game. They play because there's a lot of money and a lot at stake. I think the players are smarter today. They're more educated, and it's completely different than it used to be.
Yeah. Completely different. It's all around the country. You talked about that story where Cooper Flagg's across the country from the kid in California. Well, Cooper Flagg's from Maine, and now he's going down to Mount Verde to go to a prep school specifically for basketball all the way in Florida. And then they do these meetups where you're playing at Rikers and Dykeman out in Harlem, and you're having all these collabs, and all these kids get to play with each other, and they see each other. Where you open your phone, you open Twitter, 360 East Bay from Cooper Flagg. It's unbelievable, and it's definitely taken the game to the new heights.
Yeah, but the problem is that I worry about the mental wellness aspect, that you don't have a chance to be a kid. Like, do you think that Cameron Boozer can just go out on a Friday night with, that cute girl that he likes at school? He can't. Why? Well, there's a lot of reasons. Number one, he's playing at the Peach Jam this weekend, as an example. He goes out and he already has autograph seekers. He's got memorabilia, people wanting his shoes. All of that is big money. And then also, as a 15 and a 16 and a 17-year-old, when I screwed up on the basketball court, nobody knew it. Nobody had any idea. My dad pushed me hard. That was incentive to play well. I like to compete. That was incentive, but there was nothing other than that. And if I had a horrible game, if I got sick, or if I was just not feeling like I wanted to play anymore, nobody would ever know it. So it's different. There's a lot of positives. There's a lot of things to worry about too.
Yep, for sure.
So, you mentioned the game changing. I don't think really the casual fan at home understands the magnitude of being a top high school basketball player in the country nowadays. You mentioned, the problems with it, but getting that much competition at an early age, going against the top guys, do you see these players just kind of changing their play styles in a way almost because they're going up against such good talent? Or, is it really just a pro and con situation, with the way that they're living their lives compared to how you did as a regular high school student, you might say?
Yeah, I remember when I was in 7th grade, I went to Johnny Orr basketball camp, and there was a guy named Irvin Magic Johnson. I had read about him. He was still in high school, and everybody in the camp went to his court when he played games, and he was he was magnetic. He was so bigger than life. I couldn't believe it.
An aura to him.
Yeah, and so he changed the game. I can remember basketball fans coming to my games because they had never really seen anybody ever dunk in person. Like guys were excited to see a dunk. I think that some guys did not even cover me because they wanted to see a dunk in person. I remember almost anytime you dunked the ball back then, if you automatically grab the rim because it's a reflex. Technical fouls. I had probably 6 or 7 technical fouls
hanging on
the rim. And so the game is so different. The competition level has elevated the players so much. The expectations, the shooting ability, the athleticism. Players don't have to worry about developing their skills because they have a mental coach, they've got a nutritionist, they've got a sports psychologist, they've got a speed coach, they've got a strength coach. And when I was growing up in Clarkston, we're in the country. My basketball court was dirt. I didn't have asphalt. I played on dirt, and I just worked on shots that I saw the NBA players do on Sunday on TV.
Yep.
That there was one game on TV a week, and I would watch it, and I would try some of those things. Now these players all have their individual skill coaches, and I think it really helps them a lot.
Definitely. I mean, you're watching Bob Lanier, shooting from the post off the backboard, and you're doing cone drills.
And way to break out Lanier.
Come on now. I'm an old soul, but now it's players working on, can I do a 360 windmill on this fast break? Can I smack the glass after I throw an emphatic dunk down? It really has changed the game.
Yeah.
And, with that, do you think clearly it can be exhausting at a point for these young guys going through this at a young age, like a lot to expect from them. You didn't have as much expectation. And that kind of leads me to my next question of recruiting. Your recruiting experience must have been completely different from what these kids are seeing, with coaches reaching out or NIL in that situation.
So I feel so incredibly fortunate that I didn't have to go through recruiting today. I recently talked to a high school senior, and I said, do you call your coaches back when they call you or when they text you? And he opened his phone and he showed me that he had 719 voicemails, not text messages, voicemails. And he had 3 times that amount text messages that weren't even opened. And so it's such a nonstop flow that he just completely ignored his phone. So my senior year, I was recruited by everybody. Jerry Tarkanian was calling my dad at 3 a.m. And there were a lot of stories like that. But my schools were Michigan, Ohio State, Duke, North Carolina, Michigan State, and Notre Dame. I visited all of them. Dean Smith, one of the greatest coaches of all time, was actually in person at 8 of my high school games. So he would leave his team, fly to Detroit, drive out to Clarkston. That's the way it was done. It was really common to see Judd Heathcote, Elvin Miller, Digger Phelps, Johnny Orr, Judd Heathcote, I already mentioned, and also, the assistant coaches as well. Mm-hmm. It's crazy to think that these icons are traveling across the country to watch a high school kid, but they did. And we got to the point where every day there were 40 letters in the mailbox. Like I remember at West Quad Chicago House, like everybody in their house wrote a letter and put it in a box and mailed it. And so one day I get this box and it's filled with all these letters from these college students. They would go to my sister's high school games in case I showed up. It was relentless. And it was also a lot easier to deal with than to have a cell phone where you just can't disconnect from it.
That's unbelievable. Your sister's thinking, oh, these coaches are coming here to see me. No, can we speak to your brother? Oh, that's amazing. I would, personally like, and I'm sure a lot of others would like to hear, finalizing that decision to go to Michigan, where you're choosing over a team in North Carolina with Dean Smith, who's one of the greatest coaches of all time. Was there any pressure? What was that like?
Yeah, there was. My final 3 came down to Ohio State, which is crazy to think that I grew up a Michigan football fan, and I really liked Ohio State. As a matter of fact, I had a press conference to announce my school at the library in Clarkston. That morning, the Detroit Free Press wrote an article saying Tim McCormick to choose Ohio State. They took a guess. I don't know where they came up with that. I was reading the paper 2 hours before the press conference saying, oh, I guess I'm going to Ohio State. It was really surprising to me. I really thought hard about going to North Carolina. Mm-hmm. I would have been in the class between James Worthy and Michael Jordan. And it was something I really wanted to do. But I'm so close with my family, and I thought that it was a great opportunity to play in my home state. I knew I was always going to live in Michigan, and the academic piece was really important. And then also, I had a lot of knee issues in my college career. If I would have been at North Carolina, they had Sam Perkins. It would have been hard to get on the court. At Michigan, I knew that there was going to be minutes. If I struggled at all, I was always going to get a chance to play.
That's definitely a comfort factor for sure. That definitely can
help. What if Tim McCormick went to North Carolina? We can ask ourselves that question. But instead, you end up at the University of Michigan. You stay home. You go to Ann Arbor, and you mentioned those knee injuries. So you play all 30 games as a freshman. You get there, you're really effective, and then you have these knee injuries. Can you kind of talk about that? Because nowadays you see a guy go down with a knee injury, obviously everyone's upset about it, but in a year they'll be back because of the technology nowadays. So for you, was it up in the air if you were going to keep playing? What was kind of going through your mind?
Yeah, it's a long and winding road talking about that transition going from Clarkston High School to Michigan. So when I was in Clarkston, I was a good player. I averaged 35 points and 20 rebounds a game and 6 blocks. Like it was fun and it was easy.
Pretty good.
And everywhere that I went, little old ladies wanted my autograph. There were TV crews, there were writers. It was hard as a 17-year-old to keep it all in perspective that I still had a long way to go. And I walked on the campus at Michigan with an attitude like the Messiah has arrived, because that's all I knew. Basketball was easy, and I was so underprepared for what I was going to face. Like I remember playing at Iowa, Steve Craftsison and Steve Wade are nobodies that nobody has ever heard of, and they destroyed me like you can't believe. Going up against Joe Barry Carroll and Herb Williams, and there were so many good players. And even on Michigan's team, Paul Heyerman was a senior. He was smart. He was a good player. He was better than me. And so, I played. I think I led the team in block shots, but I played 12 minutes a game as a McDonald's All-American 5-star. And my knees were really starting to bother me. At the end of the season, I had double knee surgery. I didn't play basketball for 16 months. I put on 50 pounds, and the question wasn't, is Tim McCormick going to go to the NBA? Is, can he play at Michigan? And so there was a whole recalibration that I needed to have regarding my expectations. But it all changed with a great mentor.
Yeah. Well, if the question was, can Tim McCormick continue to play? The answer is yes. For your senior year, you end off in a great way, bringing home the 1984 NIT title. Talk to us a little bit about that. 28 points along with 14 rebounds. What a phenomenal way to end off your career and just give yourself some momentum going into an absolutely stacked draft class.
Yeah, Cooper, it was really pretty interesting to me because I remember getting the trophy, and I was just filled with this emotion based on how low I was. I really think that when I was when I sat out 16 months, when I put that weight on, I was so out of shape. I lost all my confidence. A lot of the people that I thought were friends and supporters, they went away. Actually, there's a story I want to share that was very impactful in me getting to the NIT finals. When I was being recruited, I really was attracted to the Michigan football program. I met Bo. I went to every single football game and tailgated and just loved Michigan football. So at my lowest point, it was May 1st before my junior year. I get a phone call from Bo Schembeckler. I mean, why is Bo calling me? And the conversation went like this. He said, McCormick, be in my office in 10 minutes. And he hung up on me. And so, first of all, I'm thinking, was that really Bo? How did he get my number? And what does he want? So I walked in, and he got right in my face and stuck his finger in my chest and told me I was soft and I was weak. I was out of shape, and I had no idea what hard work was. And he said, you're going to report to the football building right now and every day the rest of the summer, and the guys on my team are going to teach you how to work. And he said, now get out of here. And so I got out of there, but I was actually kind of filled with hope because he had a plan for me. He said, you're going to learn how to work. And I didn't know how to work clearly. So the first workout, we went to the big house, 100,000 empty seats, and there were probably about 50 football players and one soft and lazy and out of shape basketball player. And they said, we're going to do 40-yard dashes. And I thought, I could do that. That's like a half of a basketball. I can do that. So we lined up, and they blew the whistle, and everybody took off. And I was running as fast as I could. I was actually kind of proud. Like I was really pushing myself. And I crossed the 40-yard line in 51st place. I got beat by a guy that was 329 pounds. And then we raced back. I was dead last 40 straight times.
Reality check.
Yeah. And I remember falling to my knees, just gasping for air. And it put in perspective, I bet that I had never once run as fast as I could. Like I was pacing myself. I didn't have to play that hard. So I remember, I think it was Keith Bostic, who was a captain of the team. Great player. I really idolized him. And he said, we've got Notre Dame September 1st. Let's do 10 more. And I'm just like laying on the ground, gasping for air, saying, I'm not doing that. And they pulled me back to the line. I did 10 more. And I was so exhausted. I felt pain I had never felt before. But I also had hope and optimism because if I could do this today and every day the rest of the summer, maybe I could become something. And I lost 20 pounds. I all of a sudden was running at linebacker speed by the end of the summer, and I came back the next year a different player.
I mean, you were ready to go. I mean, that's phenomenal. That's
Bo's
awesome.
my hero.
Everyone loves a Bo.
That was an unbelievable story.
Yeah.
That
Bo's story can't really be beat. That's great stuff right there.
My God.
And, Michigan, obviously the team. You're a Michigan man through and through. And, you won an NIT title. It wasn't an NCAA title. It wasn't a conference championship. It was an NIT title. And when you say that to people nowadays, it doesn't mean as much. It really doesn't. And for you, you talked about that joy that you felt, especially for you because you went through a lot of your time in Ann Arbor, but really just winning that for the university, for your team, for head coach Bill Frieder. And overall, like the feeling for that, we talk about, trying to bridge the gap between when you played to nowadays basketball, especially because you're so involved with, the young players nowadays. Talk about the NIT title because I think that's unbelievable. It gives me chills almost a little bit because of how much that meant. But nowadays, it's just not the same.
Yeah. So when we ended the season, I was really frustrated. Roy Tarpley was coming on. I could see he had stardom written all over him. We had a chance to play in the NCAA and lost on the last day of the season, which was my birthday. On that very same day, I found out that I had a redshirt year, obviously. I didn't want to just come back. I had my degree. I applied to graduate school with over a 3-point GPA and got denied. And I was like,
we were going to get to that, but that's crazy.
What am I supposed to do? Just come back and take a couple classes? I didn't want to do that. And so I really started thinking, should I just leave early and go play in Europe? I don't want to just waste a year. So the NIT started, and I got off to a fast start. And we played some good teams. We played Dayton. We played Marquette, Wichita State. They all had star players. And I remember our team started getting hot, and I started playing well, and I was gaining confidence. We went to Madison Square Garden, which I just love that place. We beat Del Curry, that's Steph Curry's dad. They had a really good team. And then we played Notre Dame. I didn't like Digger Phelps, and I really was excited to play against him in Madison Square Garden, and had the best game of my career. Now, the nice thing about what happened was that it was an Olympic year, and the way that it fell into place is that Bobby Knight was the coach. He was watching the game. Sam Bowie from Kentucky hurt his foot, and he was eliminated from the Olympic trials. I got a call as a replacement, and so I got a chance to try out for the U.S. Olympic team, played really well. That boosted my draft status, and I'm probably screwing up your order because that's probably a story you want to talk about later.
Hey, we're going to let you roll with it. Let's hear it.
No, I will never forget, looking at my parents. They knew how sad I was at different points during my college career. I loved Michigan. Holding the trophy and red, white, and blue basketball. It was just, it was really a story of redemption, and it was one of the proudest moments of my life.
Unbelievable.
That's awesome.
And I want Cooper to ask, but I'm excited to hear about these 1984 Olympic trials.
Yep. I mean, you kind of spoke about it, and it's something that we definitely want to talk about. I mean, the trials with Michael Jordan and Patrick Ewing, and being one of the last four cuts, I think, alongside Charles Barkley. Is that right?
Well, so the way it worked out is I showed up with so much confidence and zero expectations. And the first game that we played at the Olympic trials, I went head to head with Patrick Ewing, and it was such a rush for me because Patrick Ewing, I had watched him my whole career, and I had never played against him. And to be able to go head to head with him, I was playing like it was the seventh game of the NBA Finals. And he didn't know who I was. He was just kind of easing his way into it. I don't think he had played in a couple of weeks. And I just destroyed him on this particular day. I mean, I remember it today.
Georgetown Patrick Ewing as well.
Yeah. And so I think that opened eyes. I had so much confidence and just started playing better and better. And after the first 3 or 4 days, they cut down to, it was like 35. A lot of really good players. John Stockton got cut. Charles Barkley got cut. And I couldn't believe it. I was on the list to come back. So we went home for 10 days. I started training really, really hard, came back, played well again. And it got down to 14. And I thought, wow, I've got a chance to make this.
Oh my God.
And I thought this would be life altering to be an Olympic gold medalist, a teammate of Ewing and Jordan and Wayman Tisdale and Sam Perkins. And so the night before the final cut, we played a game in Bloomington at Assembly Hall. It was the Olympic team against NBA players. Isaiah Thomas was there. I mean, they were really good. And we beat them badly. I had a double-double. And I remember calling my dad saying, Dad, this may sound crazy, but I think I just made the Olympic team. And he was so excited. And the next day, I got a call, and Bobby Knight said, "Can you come to my office?" And I thought, he's going to congratulate me. He probably wants to give me a big hug. This is going to be so exciting. And he said, I'm sorry, I'm letting you and Lancaster Gordon go. And I don't think, those moments where you just feel the energy and the power running out of you. I was so deflated. And it turns out that there were 3 big guys that I was competing with, John Koncak, Joe Klein, and Jeff Turner. Their 3 coaches were actually Bobby Knight's assistant coaches. And
Bias.
Here we go.
I think, but anyway, it worked out like it was supposed to. The fact that I had a chance to showcase myself against really good players, and at all of our practices, there were NBA scouts there. They were all watching. They saw what I could do. So it was a blessing. I still think that I could have been on that team, but it worked out like it was supposed to, and it was fine.
You mentioned Bobby Knight. He was the head coach of that team, and Cooper, an Indiana guy right here, knows a thing or two about his history. And he later said it was a mistake cutting you, if I'm not wrong.
He did.
And maybe if you have, not only one of the craziest coaches, but one of the craziest human beings of all time, maybe Bobby Knight.
Yeah.
Do you have any stories about him, or maybe just him telling you that he wished he had you on the team?
Well, there's a couple of things that jump out at me. When I was playing later in my career for the Knicks, the Indiana Hoosiers were playing at Madison Square Garden before a game, and he sought me out and he just said, "I just wanted to tell you that in all of my years of coaching, cutting you from the Olympic team was the biggest mistake that I ever made."
Wow.
And so
biggest mistake.
Yeah. Now it did me no good. I said, "Do you have a gold medal for me, or can you make it right?" No, you can't. But it was pretty
words
cool
of affirmation.
It was pretty cool that he said that.
Wow. I guess kind of leading into now your professional career. So you go through those Olympic trials and you're playing good. And I'm not a professional athlete. I'm a golf enthusiast. I believe golf is a game of feel. And when you felt just good and you got a confident stroke and you're defending well, and this is leading right into the NBA draft, how did that help your confidence, knowing that you were going to be definitely a first-round pick, if not, in the top 15?
Well, it was kind of it was a neat time because when the draft occurred, we were still with the U.S. Olympic team, and on draft night, I was sitting in the chair right next to Michael Jordan. Sam Perkins was there, Leon Wood, the other guys that were going to get drafted. And we all talked about our goals and our expectations. I'm convinced that Michael Jordan knew he was going to be the greatest of all time. He talked with such a swagger. He was such an intense competitor and a leader, and he knew exactly where he was going. And so that was a great introduction into the NBA to be around those guys. And I also felt like the NBA was actually an easier game than college. In college, everything was so compact, and the referees let you play more. There was just no space. There was no oxygen. And in the NBA, you're playing one-on-one against people, and there was so much spacing, so much more speed.
Just go to work.
So the game was a lot easier for me.
Well, I think, like Cedar Point, draft night was a roller coaster for you because we looked at it, drafted 12th overall by Cleveland. Then you get traded to Washington. All right, I'm going to be in the nation's capital. No, you're not. You're going to the other Washington, and you land in Seattle. What was that like, getting traded twice, landing on your third team all in one night?
You don't hear that nowadays.
No.
Even with a ton of trades on draft night, you don't hear multiple trades in one night. So,
well, I immediately went on the draft show and talked about how excited I was to be a Cavalier. I was lying. I didn't think that going to Cleveland would be good for me. I felt like it was important to get far away and just grow up. I had always lived within an hour of my home. I still took my laundry home on weekends. My mom would take care of it for me. I needed to get away. And so we were back at the practices for the Olympic team, and we went back into the locker room. This is like 3 hours after the draft, 4 hours maybe. And Bobby Knight gave us our thoughts from the practice. You guys did this. We need to do this better. And then he said, by the way, McCormick, congratulations on being drafted by Cleveland. I said, thanks, Coach. And he said, but they didn't want you, and they traded you to Washington. And he walked out the door. That's all he said. And everybody is just really, really confused. And then he popped his head and he said, McCormick, Washington doesn't think you're any good either. They traded you to Seattle. And so now everybody's kind of like, my teammates are chuckling, and I'm very confused. And what's he doing? And then he said, and if you don't get in gear, I'm going to trade you to Alaska for some fishing rights. And you can imagine that there was very little from the conversation that I could say that was clean. But he was just a great coach. Love the guy, and can't say enough about Bobby Knight.
It's a great story.
I'm not sure I would have wanted to play for him.
It would have been a little tough.
Yeah.
Would have been a little tough.
All right. So we finally made our way to your NBA career. We're going to do a little segment here. We're going to do a little story time with Tim.
Story time.
Okay.
So we're going to ask you about a player, about a coach, and these are people that, have been on your team throughout your career. And we just want to hear your main thoughts really, or a story you have. Number one, I think we got to start off with the Sixers team because you were on a team filled with Charles Barkley, Julius Erving, Cliff Robinson, Mo Cheeks. I mean, let's start with Dr. J himself.
Yep.
Was there really anything, that stuck out to you about him? Because he was in the later end of his career, but he's still around.
He was still great. The last game of our regular season, he was 32 points away from reaching the 30,000 point plateau. And so we all thought, can he get there? Can we help him out? He had 32 at half.
Oh my God.
And didn't even play the second half.
Wow.
He was just incredible.
Wow.
And so I would say 2 of every 3 games he was great. And that's kind of a telltale sign. When you get to the end of your career, you can't do it every single night. And then the other problem is during that era, everybody had a small forward. Marcus Johnson, Alex English, Larry Bird, Walter Davis. I mean, everybody had a great small forward. And so it was a tough era to play. But I just followed him around. I idolized him. I remember when I was a senior in high school, I wore the white and red Converse All-Stars like Julius.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the Sixers came to town, I called Dean Smith and said, Billy Cunningham's the head coach of the Sixers. Do you think that you could help me get tickets and into the locker room? Like what a bold thing for a kid to ask Dean Smith, but I did. And after the game, I met with Bobby Jones and with Billy Cunningham in the locker room. But the whole thing, I wanted to meet Julius Erving. So I walked by Andrew Toney and Mo Cheeks and Daryl Dawkins, and I introduced myself to Julius. And he said, "You look like you might be a good ball player. Sit down a second." Remember, I'm in high school.
Yep.
And so I took off my Chuck Taylor canvas all-star shoe, and I gave it to Julius. I asked if he would sign it. And he did, and I took it right home. I threw the left shoe away. The right one went up on my mantle in my room. And then at the end of that year with Julius, he was retiring. I grabbed that shoe again and had him sign the other half of it. And so I've got that in my office now.
You still have it. I was going to say.
My most cherished possession.
You got to still have that. I'm happy to hear that.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Let's get into the coaches, right, Cooper? I mean, you played for some of the greatest coaches of all time.
I guess finishing off your career in the Mecca, and you already mentioned that you loved playing in Madison Square Garden so much, but did you love playing under Pat Riley? I mean, such an intense coach that is so, storied. What was it like playing under him alongside, your rival, Patrick Ewing, in the Olympic trials, and now you team up on the Knicks?
Yeah, he was no rival.
Yeah.
He did
Baby
not fear.
food. Baby food.
Yeah,
Barbecue chicken.
Yeah, he loved seeing me come in the building. So Bo Schembeckler and Pat Riley are the 2 non-father role models in my life. Bo changed my career, but I learned so many things from Pat Riley. Every day he would walk in and he would have a plan how you could get better every single day. As an example, early in the season, and he had just come from the Lakers, so we were getting his freshest material. We played a game against the Pacers at MSG, and we end up getting beat in a close game. It was not a bad loss. They had the Davises, they had Reggie Miller, Vern Fleming, Rick Smith. Like, they were really good. But we lost that game, and Pat Riley had such high expectations for us, and he was so distraught. After the game, he just paced back and forth, and he undid his tie and took off his sport coat and threw it in the corner, and it was a horrible sign for us, because when he had that look in his eye, the next day we were going for 3 hours hard, and it was going to be a brutal practice. So as I was watching him, he sat down in his chair, grabbed the stat sheet, grabbed his remote, and sat in front of the TV and started replaying the first plays of the game. And about an hour later, we left, and he's still there. And the next morning, I walked back in the locker room to start practice, and sitting in the exact same chair, looking at the same TV with the remote, same outfit, unshaven, hair messed up, was Pat Riley taking notes. And so did he really spend the night? Seriously, did he spend the night? And so we all sat in our chairs and we watched him. It was just, I mean, nobody said a word. No, there was no distraction. And eventually he hit the stop button. He walked over, for dramatic effect, drink of water, paced back and forth, was really contemplating, looking at his notes, building the intensity. And he said, "Men, I've been watching the game film." Yeah, like all night long.
For 12 hours.
And he said, "I've identified 3 things that if we do better, we will beat the Pacers and we can win a championship." And he shared those, and he said, "Let's go to work." And we went out for practice. And it was always something like that. He was incredible as a motivator.
For the love of the game. For the love of the game.
So intense, such a hard worker. Just love Pat Riley.
You know what? He really is the same guy today. You can see it, watching the games in Miami.
Yep. So do you hear people say, "Oh, heat culture, that's a bunch of garbage"? No, it's not garbage. It's Pat Riley. Mm-hmm. Pat Riley's all about culture. And if you aren't willing to work, he doesn't want you.
Get out.
You know what? Culture is really the biggest thing I've learned as I've watched sports over time, because let's take the Lions, for example. We had negative culture here in Detroit, regarding that team. So Dan Campbell comes in, switches things around, and it kind of leads me to my next point. Talking about these coaches, you played for Pat Riley, also Lenny Wilkins, some other guys as well. You seem like, you had these relationships with them, and they were player coaches. They played back in the day. But nowadays, it feels like the position of a head coach has changed. I mean, we just saw, let's take Monty Williams, for example. Not the best example, but he came in with a young team, and it was a struggle, really throughout the whole season. He didn't find that click early on. It felt like he didn't really establish his tone or his style right away, and he was just kind of rolling with the punches. For Pat Riley, I mean, he's in there. He's running the show how he wants to. How do you think the head coaching position really has changed in the NBA? Because going back to our, last point with players, coming up, really being raised differently in the game, going against guys, being put on a pedestal a little bit. How does it change with the way head coaches can discipline?
Nowadays, the average salary in the NBA is what, 10, 12 million? If you're a good player, you're over 25 million. Mm-hmm. And so if something comes to a head, who's leaving? Is it going to be the coach or the guy that is your franchise player?
That you're spending $50 million a year on.
The coaches do not have the same power. I think that we talked about it a little bit earlier, that players just have a different confidence nowadays. They're entitled, they're emboldened, they are franchises themselves. Each NBA player is actually the CEO of a multi-million-dollar corporation, right?
It's a good way of putting it, yeah.
And themselves.
And so they are completely aware of their power. And I will say this, the players today, much more advanced, smarter, able to process their power and their value better. Back when I played, I learned from, some of the great mentors of the game. Dave Bing, what a hero. Did you know that when he finished his last Pistons game each season, he would take a day off, and then the day after that, he would go to the bank, and he had a job. And he would work 40 hours a week, wearing a suit and a tie, learning business. Bob Lanier was out in the community. He was a great leader, but he had to build his career away from the game too. Nowadays, no, that's not the case.
Yep. Anthony Tolliver, real estate agent. I do know that. I love him. He's a great guy.
Miss that guy.
Well, those stories were amazing. But I guess a main point and something to really ask you is you talk about these mentors and how much they meant to you. When did you realize that, and you retired at 29, when did you realize that you wanted to do something after your playing career? Going with the Players Association and coaching and all this stuff. When did you think, hey, these guys meant so much to me, I would love to do the same for the younger generation?
Good question. So I spent a lot of time thinking about what was next. And the natural would have been to be in coaching. But I wanted it to be a dad. I wanted to be a father. I wanted to coach my daughter's little league teams. I wanted to be home at Thanksgiving to take kids trick-or-treating. I wanted to help them with their homework. I didn't have kids at that point, but I was thinking ahead. And so I thought if I'm going to be a coach, I'm going to have to uproot my family every third year, who knows. If I've got a game, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be at practices late. When I'm home, I'm going to be consumed with watching film. I don't think coaching, even though I've always had a passion for it, I didn't think that was best for who I am. And so I do think I'm a student of the game. I was benefited by playing in Seattle, Philadelphia, New Jersey, Houston, Atlanta, New York. Every one of those stops, I learned from a whole new set of teammates, new assistant coaches. I spent a lot of time. I took some of my coaches out to lunch, my assistant coaches, when we're on the road, and said, let's talk a little bit. What's your philosophy on this or that? So I really thought that I could be a coach, but the thing that I was doing was by studying my scouting reports and talking to coaches, I was developing a mind for broadcasting, to be able to watch a game, break it down, figure out what the coaches are doing. And so I did think that I wanted to become a broadcaster, and it was a tough transition learning how, but it was a good move for me.
Yeah, and for people who don't know, Tim, is a broadcaster in studio for ESPN, Big Ten. Now he works with Bally. But you said something that I want to get into because I just want to talk about basketball, and I want to hear from you. Me and Cooper love basketball, and you said student of the game, and it feels like nowadays players in the NBA, not as much of a student of the game, doesn't have that passion as much. You hear sometimes people talk about, players not loving basketball in the NBA. You see it, when players open up on podcasts or whatnot. And for me, I love basketball and I love the NBA, but the regular season can be frustrating. It can definitely be frustrating to watch. And with free agency practically being the second biggest part of the calendar for the NBA season, what do you think about people, falling back in love with basketball in the sense that, focusing on different, aspects of the game? You talked about, players having more leverage now, not really having that connection with coaches. Where do you kind of see things going, or do you think it's in the spot where it's going to continue to go?
No, I think the game is really healthy. It's global and it's growing. Last year, 130 international players in our league out of 450. There are so many advancements in the way the game is played, the shooting, the skill development, the space so people can get to the rim. I don't think there's anything to change. I worry about the fact that players are worth so much that if they do have an injury, teams will shut them down to protect their investment. I'm not sure where this game can go. I kind of wonder if someday, you're going to have to raise the rim.
4-point line, maybe
4-point line. Sure. I don't see any need to widen the court.
Yeah.
Because everything still happens near the rim. I remember growing up, there was an article in Sports Illustrated that said, will we need a 12-foot rim? And I keep thinking about that's been 40, 50 years. I don't think that's the case. So I think the game is really healthy. The players are thriving, the owners are making money, and there's just more and more opportunities for fans to consume that digital reach that the NBA players have through social media. You know, the days when I was growing up and you would watch on Channel 7 in Detroit, the one game that was on per week,
Yeah.
that's all the access you had. And so it's completely different.
I guess something that I myself am infatuated by throughout your career is your love and all that you've done with the NBA Players Association, working so close with that organization. How has it helped shaped, kind of who you are? And now you're working as an analyst. You're doing the pregame and postgame show for the Pistons. You're calling games on ESPN and Big Ten. How does that help you give a new perspective into what basketball really is all about at the highest level? And how much do you love just, really being in there?
Yeah, such an incredible blessing for me. The day that I retired, the NBA Players Association started their player programs division, and I was a player rep. I was on the agent committee. I was involved in the union, and I believe in fighting for the players' rights, and so I took a job in the player programs department, and it's been over 30 years, which is shocking to me. But my passion is education. We talk to the players about career development and substance abuse, healthy relationships, career development. That a lot of really important topics. And I remember the first team awareness meeting that I was part of. I walked into the Bulls locker room, and there was Bill Cartwright, John Paxson, and Michael Jordan, and Scottie Pippen, and Dennis Rodman. And I'm telling those guys about the importance of saving for the future. And I mean, Michael Jordan turned down $30,000 or $30 million a year. He wanted a bigger contract. Like it was surreal to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know that I've had a chance to make a lot of wonderful relationships. Kevin Durant and Steph Curry and Cade Cunningham. You can go through the whole league. These are all people that I've had a chance to get to know. We have our top 100 camp for the best 100 players in the country. And the first camp we had, Kobe Bryant was there. So it goes that far back when he was in high school. We have a rookie transition program for getting the young guys ready for their jump to the NBA.
Yep.
We have our draft combine education program. And then we have our team awareness meetings where we go out and we meet with the teams as a whole. And we just try to support them. And it's been so much fun. It's a labor of love.
That's awesome. And I really hope people, got to listen to this sit down and really understand, someone like you, your love for the game. You said you're still a student of the game and everything. And we're going to wrap things up here quickly. But the last question from me, we'll say it's presented by Sportscaster. We'll go into the broadcasting aspect of your career and just say, broadcasting is becoming a thing that's going to be accessible to everyone. It's something that more people are, wanting to get invested in. Really, obviously you had immense knowledge of the game for talking about the game, commenting on players, certain play styles and whatnot. What do you really have advice for regarding getting into that space? And what would you look out for? What would you watch in a certain game? Really, what are you looking at? And how did you, piece all your knowledge with those thoughts together?
Carter, well first of all,
getting something. Here we go.
Wow.
Talk about marketing at its finest right here.
Yes.
Look at
Come
this
on.
handsome fella right here. Come on.
Check out the back, though.
Oh, I love that.
Come
I love
on.
that
Kind of
even more.
casual.
Oh my God.
Love it.
So I really appreciate you guys having me on your podcast. And you asked, what advice I would have. I've shared a lot of stories, and I think it's really important. People learn from hearing stories, and so I think that when I do a broadcast, somebody just saw somebody make a 3-point shot. what I try to find out is how did you make that 3-point shot? And so before the games, I talk to the players, and I might find out that, his mom, grew up as a basketball player in high school, and she wants her son to be a 3-point shooter like she was. So they went in the backyard every day after school and took 100 threes. That's some insight and access that other people may want to hear. Other announcers may not work hard enough to get that. I think it's important to learn to be really concise with what you have to say. I believe that you have to outwork your opponents for a college game. And last year, I was the main voice for NBC Sports for the A10. So if a team was playing, I was watching their games, and I took notes because I knew that if somebody said something really good in a broadcast, I was going to use it too.
Bring it up.
That was going to become my material eventually. And then also the very first season that I broadcast the games for the Pistons, I was still a member of the New York Knicks, but my knee was too bad. The Pistons hired me, and I broadcast their games for the whole season. And at the end of the year, I had made a comment about Isaiah Thomas, who was struggling with his Achilles. And I said, I thought he had lost half of a step. And the next day I was called in and released.
Here we go.
Because I had made that comment.
Wow.
I thought it was accurate. And Isaiah actually retired soon thereafter.
I was going to say that sounds like the timeline of when he had his Achilles problems.
But you also have to be very disciplined in what you say and make sure when you say something that your intended audience understands completely what you mean to say.
And where you're coming from, yeah.
It was a great lesson. And it was also really good because the next year I was broadcasting Mid-American Conference games, and I would drive to Athens, Ohio for Miami of Ohio and the Ohio Bobcats and get $250. I learned my craft at that time.
Yep.
And so it was a great experience.
Awesome.
Unbelievable.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Tim.
Man, absolutely phenomenal talking to you, hearing all your stories, going from Bo to Pat Riley to all that you've done after your career. We really, really do appreciate you sitting down, giving us your time and talking with us, and also allowing us a phenomenal read. Never be average. So,
I mean, what I got from that last part, just stay curious and keep digging for more and
Yep.
just keep going.
Yep.
We love it.
Appreciate you guys. Thank
really
you.
appreciate you.
Good
Thank
man
you so
right here.
much,
We love
Tim.
it.
Thank you.